So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Derby City Council Cabinet on the 15th of July 2020. Can I ask those members and officers present at the meeting to, as usual, mute their microphones and, if necessary, their cameras until they are actually speaking during the meeting. Do we need to announce, Alex, those that are present, or is it enough to declare that all the cabinet are present and the opposition leaders too, along with relevant officers?
Yeah, I think that's sufficient. Thanks, Chair. The names of the participants will appear on the live broadcast as they speak.
In that case, then we'll be able to crack on with the meeting and go to the agenda. And item 1 on the agenda are apologies, please.
None received, Chair.
So there are 2 late items under item 2. The first one is in relation to the new entertainment venue, which I propose to deal with in between items 7 and 8 on the agenda. And there's also one in relation to funding for the museums, which I intend to deal with between items 10 and 11. So the third item on the agenda is receipt of petitions. Any petitions?
There are none.
Okay, so identification of urgent items which we'll call in will apply is the same as I just dealt with in relation to late items.
Yeah, there are none to which calling won't apply. Thank you.
Okay. Item 5 is any declaration of interest, please. Okay, take that to be none. Item 6 then is the minutes of the meeting held on the 10th of June 2020. I've seen it, and they are, to me, a accurate record of that meeting. I have a seconder.
Seconded.
Thank you. In that case, can we agree the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of June, please? Agreed?
Agreed.
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 Okay.
Agreed.
Okay, so item 7 is matters referred, and these are recommendations from the Executive Scrutiny Board, of which we've got a list, but as usual, I intend to deal with them as each item comes up, and we'll go through those recommendations at each individual item stage. So, moving on from there, I'm going to take the first of the urgent items, which is on the assembly rooms. Who's going to present that for us, please? Oh, sorry, it's the new performance venue. So the sponsor is Rachel. Is it going to be you?
Yes, it is me. So I'm getting my meter. You were confusing me with the title. Sorry, Chris.
That's it. I'm myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, so this report brings to Cabinet an opportunity brought forward by the market for Derby to create a new performance venue. I wanted to really lay out, if you like, the economic context to which this has been brought forward. We clearly, no one can underestimate the impact of COVID on our local economy, also on a national level, and recognising the city centre and our concern previously to COVID about the vulnerability of our city centre and the need for cultural vibrancy to really enhance and support the regeneration of our city. To bringing this forward at this time, at a time of clearly risk around the economy generally, is a real signal of confidence in the city, particularly by the private sector, and a belief, if you like, in the regeneration of Derby. So on its own, this proposal as a performance venue brings a gross value added uplift of £11 million a year, and that's into the hospitality and the supply chain around it, over 200 jobs, and 250,000 visitors into the city. But as I've said, it also signals much needed confidence in Derby. It also generates a derelict site of considerable concern for a number of years and is a catalyst for further investment over and above itself. The commercial arrangements for this arrangement are about transferring some of the risk of the building construction planning of this facility and the operating of this venue to the private sector. So it's a very different model than perhaps previous models have been considered by the council. The funding arrangement is that the council agrees a forward purchase agreement to purchase the arena, but that all of that is subject to planning being in place, an operator being in place, and all of those details fixed and supported, and all that work done by the private operator, the private developer in this case. So the report seeks approval to enter the heads of terms to get to the next stage of that opportunity. As part of the agreement, the council will receive an income, so it forward funds the capital cost, but then over a period of time receives an income over at least 25 years into the council to accommodate the borrowing costs for that capital. Just to reflect a little bit on the site itself, Beckett Well has long been a significant priority for cities regeneration. It's a derelict site, been derelict for many years. It's critical in linking the Into Centre, our critical retail centre in the city, to the cathedral quarter, an independent and more cultural quarter. And it's a really important link that has been missing for a number of years. We've taken as a local authority an interventionist approach in de-risking the site and leveraging in private investment. Those things have enabled this to be brought forward at this time. There are some implications to achieving the arrangement of the proposal being put forward to us, particularly around land assembly. St James's Securities own the majority of the land at the Beckett Well site, but there are two bits that need to be just confirmed completely to create the whole requirement of land for the new venue. That includes the former Pennine Hotel and the Padley Centre. The developer is acquiring those sites, and the report really just asks the members to consider compulsory purchase options as a backstop to enable that to take place. We are working with the Padley Centre quite actively to ensure that any relocation for them is done in a way that supports their operating model and enables them to continue to play a really important part in the homeless pathway that we have in the city across a range of partners to support our most vulnerable and complex rough sleepers. So it's very important that is mentioned, and there'll be further reports on that as that work progresses. In terms of the assembly rooms site in the city, the report also seeks permission to demolish, subject to planning permission, that site, and posits the work was going on behind the scenes to look at alternative options for use of that site. Critically, the cultural elements around the marketplace for Derby City are really important to create that vibrant and attractive and really positive destination. And we are doing work to ensure that what replaces the assembly rooms will be something that adds and enhances that cultural offer. So we are looking at a number of options, potentially a mini master vision, if you like, for that part of the city that really begins to bring together all of those opportunities, the Guildhall, the Market Hall transformation, the use of the marketplace itself, to really ensure that is a vibrant and exciting part of the city as part of the overall generation. In terms of meanwhile use, so after demolition and before a new facility can be created, we are suggesting opportunities to use temporary pop-up cultural activity on that site, looking at things like street markets, urban art festivals, short-term uses, things that really add vibrancy to the city. So it's really critical that as part of this opportunity to bring the new arena into Beckett Well, that we don't lose opportunities to maintain cultural vibrancy. There's a real recognition of the importance of culture to our city's regeneration more generally, even more important now with the COVID impacts and the impact on destinations. So all of that is critically important, and we're carrying out a number of conversations behind the scenes about various options around that, which will be again brought forward in the future. Clearly this is a big project and an important implication for the council. So there are some impacts we want to just make sure that members are alive to. Clearly the council's arena, the velodrome at Pride Park, has a relationship with this new venue here. That will be dependent, the nature of that relationship will depend on the operator that is chosen as part of the process, and to whether their focus will be on things that are potentially competitive with the velodrome, like a pantomime, for example. But so part of the arrangement we're making with the developer is to ensure that whatever is provided on the Beckett-Well Arena site in that venue will be complementary to and work in partnership with the Velodrome Arena at Pride Park, so there isn't competition, but there's complementary activity, and that may mean a need for us to refocus the model for the Velodrome into more of a sports model, but that is still to be determined, but there is an impact around that. There'll also clearly be a loss in car park income on the basis of demolishing the car park at the same time as we demolish the assembly rooms. The ability to demolish one and not the other is extremely costly and complex, bearing in mind the interrelationship of those two buildings. So the recommendation is to demolish the whole, but clearly looking at how we reprovide car parking on that site temporarily in other car parks across the city, that's really important, and we'd look to provide that provision where possible. I'll very briefly look at the financial sort of headlines, but clearly the 151 officer is on this call, as is the Director of Legal, to ask the detailed questions about some of the financial arrangements. But at a headline level, the Council is being asked for just over £45 million capital to purchase the arena, the forward funding arrangement. All of that subject to all of those things I mentioned at the beginning. We have, as a council, already nearly £11 million in our assembly room capital pot. We originally allocated for the assembly rooms, and that's after any of the demolition costs. We would therefore be suggesting potential borrowing for that gap, that 35 million. And we're also looking actively at the possibility of external funding to reduce the need for that potential borrowing. There would be, on the back of that capital borrowing, income to the council on a yearly basis. The minimum lease for the arena would be 25 years, and we've taken a cautious estimate at this stage, looking at the fixed rental costs we would get back, but also some variable income we would receive from the operator around ticket sales, and our cautious estimate is around £500,000 a year. And just for members of recognition, we already have £352,000 in the medium-term financial plan for the operation of a performance venue towards that cost. Additionally, the facility itself will bring in business rates and council tax to the larger Beckett-Well development in terms of the residential development on that site. So it has a broader benefit financially for the council, but also has those wider community regeneration and confidence implications that really need to be taken into account. So this report is really about setting the ball rolling on this proposal. It sort of seals that confidence in the city. It looks at de-risking the delivery for the council, so no decision will be taken around the decision until, or no decision will be entered into until all those arrangements are in place, the planning permission, the operation, all of those things. So de-risking that for the organisation. And clearly, if there are any further detailed questions, we can answer some of those things in the private part of this meeting. But anything to do with the financial or legal, not in the private part, can be dealt with by questions to me or obviously to our colleagues who are on this call. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much for that introduction and report. I'm going to start with any questions or comments from Cabinet members first in response to that introduction.
Listen to the contributions from the opposition first, please, Chair, if that's possible. I think
okay. Well, Councillor Grays has indicated, and if other members wish to contribute, by all means, please state your intention to contribute in the chat box. I think we'll probably deal with the recommendations from exec scrutiny first, if that's okay with you, Alan, although you indicated yes, are you comfortable we'll deal with those first? Yeah. Okay, so at last night's exec scrutiny, there were 3 recommendations as a result of their deliberations. The first one was to recommend that Council Cabinet this proposal for a new performance venue is only carried forward once alternative accommodation has been found for the Padley Centre, recognising the key work conducted to support the homeless population in the city, and if this alternative accommodation cannot be found, that the private operator is offered the current assembly room site or appropriate accommodation for the Padley Centre is built into the Beckettwell development. Well, I'll deal with the other two first. I'll put those on the table as well. The second one was to recommend to Council Cabinet that the proposal to demolish the current assembly rooms is only carried forward once alternative car parking provision for those that currently use the assembly rooms has been secured. And thirdly, to recommend to Council Cabinet that it considers very carefully the extent of the delegation that it is giving to officers and whether there is sufficient democratic oversight by councillors. So I note we have Councillor Repton with us, who chairs the Exec Scrutiny Board. Martin, welcome to your first Cabinet meeting for a while. Before I invite you to introduce or to speak on those recommendations, can I just remind you that this is a Cabinet meeting. It's not a debating chamber. We want to hear from you in relation to these recommendations, but what we don't have at these meetings is political speeches or politicking. So by all means, if you'd like to speak to Cabinet in relation to these three recommendations.
Yeah, I believe there's other recommendations as well. I can't see those, Chris. Where are they?
There are other recommendations in relation to other items, but we'll deal with these three first in relation to the entertainment venue.
Okay, wait for those to come up. Yeah. The concern was raised last night, and I think rightly so, with regard to the Padley Centre, a very important institution supporting the homeless in our city. And I just wanted to make sure that before we go ahead, that provision is made for them. Okay,
so in relation to that then, thanks to your meeting last night, representatives from the Padley Centre were on Radio Derby this morning in relation to this question, and I'm delighted to say they're absolutely delighted with the communications that they're having with the council and with the developers in relation to alternative accommodation. And their words are extremely excited about the ability to provide more suitable and 21st century property for their purposes, and they're working well with us and look forward to meeting alternative arrangements. So we can agree that recommendation by all means. In addition, they were able to give a view that they found that the proposal was exciting. It was a tremendous opportunity for the city and would greatly add to the nighttime economy for the city. So they are certainly reassured, and we can reassure you that the Padley Centre will be appropriately catered for as a result of this proposal.
I'm delighted that my committee acts as a catalyst in bringing this together. So excellent, that's superb. We're on a roll here, Chris. Let's hope we continue this way. I can see we're going to have a beautiful working relationship.
Absolutely.
To recommend to Council Cabinet that the proposal to demolish the current assembly rooms is only carried forward once alternative car parking provision for those that currently use the assembly rooms has been secured. And to recommend to the Council Cabinet that it considers very carefully the extent of the delegations is given to the officers. We'll come on to that, yeah. But in terms of the car park, Chris.
Yeah, certainly. We absolutely acknowledge that the assembly rooms currently serves a purpose for a number of buildings in the area, but there are existing other car parks at Chapel Lane, Bold Lane and at Darwin Place, and I'm not able to give that reassurance that that there will be alternative parking on that site. It's going to be subject to planning permission, to what it designs and potential development on that site. And actually we need to, in this day and age, to seriously consider the value of car parking in the city centre when we are trying to reduce vehicle access in the city centre itself. So absolutely acknowledge the rationale behind the recommendation, but not able to agree that particular one.
Yeah, I think it's a challenge that is set to all of us, because obviously in this current crisis the city centre is is a shadow of what it was in terms of footfall before. What we don't want to do is make that permanent by not having the car parking in the centre. So I'm confident.
Cycling and walking, Martin.
Oh, absolutely.
We might even give them umbrellas that say "I've walked into town." And things like that.
Again, that was my idea. But if you're an octogenarian who's got problems with mobility, it's not always easy to get on your bike, Chris. So but yeah, I having made that point, I'm sure you'll take it on board.
Lots of buses as well, Martin. So on the third one, in relation to officer delegations, and I can absolutely assure you, as has always been the case under my administration, we carry out extremely strong scrutiny, not only the cabinet member, but cabinet and other cabinet members are engaged in scrutiny on major schemes. That always has been the case, will be the case, and only suitable delegated authorities will be carried through. So we can agree that one by all means.
So I'm taking that will be all councillors, Chris.
I'm sorry?
That will be all councillors will be involved in that oversight.
Oh yes, obviously through your and other scrutiny committee.
Good, excellent.
By all means, you have every opportunity to ask for information on any major project. By all means.
Thank you, Chair.
No problem. So, with the recommendations out of the way, Alan Graves, you were first to indicate.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Mr. Chairman and members of the Cabinet, this paper is most welcome for the City and is long overdue. It is always exciting when new plans come forward to enhance the cityscape and offering to the public. Customer experience in this area has been poor for such a long time, and any development must surely be better than what we have now. This paper looks at these plans. It looks like these plans have been developed over a long period of time, as it appears to be very advanced, and so I hope the detail is of equal development. I have a few observations and questions I would like you to consider and maybe respond to. One, the impressive video that has come about does highlight some narrow roadwork areas, especially in the back area, and wonder if spacing for larger vehicles intertwined with pedestrians has been given proper consideration. Two, there is no mention of transportation links. This is a long way from both the train station and the bus station, and I would like to hope that we would incorporate that into the scheme. I do find 4.4 of the paper a little disingenuous on the basis that for the last 6 years, with two administrations, discussions around the development of the assembly rooms, and this statement does not reflect that struggle, but it is written to justify the decision on this paper. I believe a more honest and open approach would be better. On that basis, I also wonder if this development was always in the minds of those bringing it forward, which is why the assembly rooms was bound to fail and the inevitable abortive costs to the taxpayer. 4.28 adds to the confusion to this decision that it suggests a temporary use of the site prior to demolition. 6. With such an extensive development, as I already mentioned, must have been on the cards for quite some time. I wonder why this was not reported to the council much earlier, if only to consider the positive impact on the city. Operating by springing the idea onto the council at such a late stage only presents suspicion on those councillors that were not aware. This is a particular case where the committee system would have involved every party before it came to council. 7. The report also highlights sensitivity around the commercial arrangements and whether the council is on a sound legal footing. 8. This impacts on whether the project is based on sound financial footing in terms of value for money for the taxpayers of Derby. 9. In terms of the velodrome, I suppose we have to use this term now the arena has been requisitioned for the Beckettwell development. I am confused about the business plan for this site. I do believe that the velodrome originally had a plan to be a sports venue, but was cross-fertilised with theatre because of lack of sport use. The council never intended the velodrome to be used for theatre, but was forced to because of lack of income from sport. Ironically, we find the net income of this site is half the repair bill because of theatre use. So is there real confidence that the velodrome can survive? 10. 2.10 is also a concern in that the council has had to put in this statement to intent to compulsory purchase the Padley Centre if mutual consent is not required. I'd like to think that we were a council that would persuade by sharing the vision with others in the city. 11. As Councillor Shanker quite often states, council reports should be viewed in terms of what is omitted rather than what we can read. I may have missed it, but has there been a feasibility study to determine the medium and long-term viability of the development?
Alan, sorry, can I just stop you for a second?
Yeah.
We're up to quite a few of them. Can you give us some indication of how many there are? Because if you want these answering, then
yeah,
you certainly may have to go over them again.
Yeah.
So we might be better to take them in steps rather than in one block.
So that and then people can ask me if they want clarity on what I'm saying. I may have missed it, but has there been a feasibility study to determine the medium and long-term viability of the development? 7.6 seems to suggest the council will still be subsidising for 25 years and maybe even longer. Subsidising is not necessarily a bad thing, except this is a private enterprise. Councillors, especially cabinet members, need to be very clear about what they're committing the council to and be transparent about it. I've only got one more, Chris. Another factor that I'm concerned about is the initial projections of the project. Government and local government projects always seem to get stung by spiralling costs that come about through one issue or another. The many years I've been a councillor, one thing that saddens me is how it is almost expected and projected costs are merely treated as the starting block, only to find the contractors manage to squeeze out a lot more cream than originally budgeted for. Bearing in mind our financial commitment in this project, it would prove to be very bad for taxpayers. So I would like to suggest the council earmarks a contract administrator or an architect to determine the cost effectiveness of the scheme, and that this person has fully detailed specification to work to. To further protect the council, I would also suggest we engage in a design and build form of contract, which places the burden of responsibility for the design of the project with the contractor. I am sure some of you will know the difficulty with this form of contract is controlling the quality and adherence to the specification, as the contractor has a degree of freedom of choice. A contract administrator would protect the council's position and ultimately costs. I would also like to see some assurance that workers from the locality of Derby, say a 30-mile radius, are used to help with the building of this, which will help the local economy and reduce the carbon footprint. I would also like to remind councillors of when
There's more than one, Alan. Is there any
statement?
Is it just one long one?
No, it's just one more short statement.
Okay.
I would also like to remind councillors of when things can really go wrong. We have had a few issues of our own, but in terms of city development, the Broadmast Centre in Nottingham is an example of the council partnering the wrong organisation to deliver a major project. This has left their ratepayers holding the baby. I want to see this as a good development for the city. And rather than it being a fait accompli with little time to scrutinise or comment. I'm finished.
Oh, already, right. Alan, I'm going to just give an overall comment on those, but I'm sure I saw Rachel beavering away writing down as many of those as she could, and she'll be able to respond to you. But last point first, really. Yes, we will endeavour to use as much local, as many local companies as possible. Absolutely take your point in relation to the things like the spiralling costs, but as Rachel will expand on, no doubt, the model that we intend to use here takes the risk, the build and development risk, away from the council, so that whilst we agree and we're working towards a contract to build this arena for around £45 million, that will be the cost and the council will be committing to. The developer and the builders will run the risk in relation to further costs. So, and in terms of picking the right developer, St James Securities have shown and have got a track record of being a fantastic developer in other cities and made major commitments to our city, and we're confident and happy with the relationship that we've built and hope to continue to build with them. The other point, a general point to make is, Alan, that a lot of what the questions you asked around transport, the narrow streets, things like that, I have to point out this is very early. This is very early doors. You know, the reason we couldn't announce this earlier was because there were commercial sensitivities that St James's needed to deal with on the site before we could go public with it. St James's have developed the video and they've developed the plans at their own risk and their own costs, and we've announced it at the very earliest opportunity. But it is just that. It's a proposal. It's the nuts and bolts of a proposal which we think is very exciting for the city, but effectively what we're doing is giving St James's Securities the exclusivity for a few months to be able to develop a business case that answers all the questions that you've asked today, before we enter into any formal contract with them. In relation to the velodrome, Rachel North already referred to that and the considerations that we are having in relation to that, and that forms part of the negotiations that we're having with St James Securities. So with that overall picture, Rachel, do you want to pick up on any of those points raised by Councillor Graves?
Yes, thank you. You've answered many of them, very helpful. I think as Councillor Leader has answered about the video, I mean, clearly in issues around roadwork and impact applications is part of the planning process when we get to that stage. Transport links, yes, it's slightly further away from the bus station and the railway than perhaps the assembly room site is, but not that far away. And actually, we are working, as we know, on transforming cities on a mass transit system for the city. And clearly, any work around this will be clearly marked and signposted, so it's really clear how to get there. And we can look at other options to try and make sure that there's access public transport onto the site. There's a point you made that's quite a political point I'm not going to answer about in the report. It's really important to say this is an opportunity brought forward by the private sector. It isn't that we've courted or asked for. It's been brought forward by the owner of the Beckett Wells site because they can see an opportunity and they have done their work and their clear diligence in the marketplace to bring something which has got robust content behind it and confidence behind it. They brought it to us. It isn't about us doing a feasibility, what's possible. They've brought something as they know is possible to deliver on this site because they see that opportunity. That's a very different way of looking at things. In terms of you asked about the meanwhile use. So that the meanwhile use would be obviously after demolition. So obviously not before. There's a confusion there. If I confused you, I apologise. The issue about the legal footing, if Emily wanted to answer that question potentially, and then the value for money basis, perhaps Simon wanted to just say a few words about that. I think the velodrome point's being covered by Chris really well. The CPO issue, I mean, absolutely, and as has been said, we're working very closely with the Padley Centre. I've met personally with the trustees. We're really keen to find a way to relocate them to be in a better place actually to support that rough sleeping work we do and the homeless pathway, and they're working very actively with us. Absolutely, the CPO is a backstop. If we needed to do it to achieve something, we would need to use it. We really do not intend to need to use it, but it's there just in case. I think we've answered the questions about projections and the design and build, etc., and local labour. So I guess we just ask Emily to answer about the legal footing and then perhaps Simon on the value for money. That's okay, colleague.
Councillor Grace, could you just repeat your question on the legal footing for me, just so I can make sure I answer all the points?
Yeah, it might be something that you want to do in the pink section of the paper. It was about the sensitivity around the commercial arrangements and whether the council is on a sound legal footing. My question was much longer, but I didn't want it to infringe our openness. So you might want to answer that.
Let's pick it up on the pink papers then. That's fine.
Okay.
So on the value for money judgment, I think you asked two questions. One in respect of feasibility, medium term, long term. What we do here is we acquire an asset with the benefit of a 25-year lease with an operator, which will give us an income stream throughout the 25 years, which will be index linked, providing sort of increases in the amount that an operator will pay us for operating the Beckett Well Arena. So actually it demonstrates improved value for money over that period. And this asset will be built with an asset life of at least 40 years. And therefore we'll have an asset even after the 25 years with significant value. The other area that you talked about was about the, if you want to call it, the overview that we have professionally, and the report details an amount for project management that will allow us to do our required actions. But as has been stated, this is a development being brought by a developer at their risk in terms of cost and other impacts, and we will make sure that we are properly equipped to do our challenge and overview. But this is not us doing a design and build as a council contract. This will be a contract with SJS building out this arena with a developer.
So, Alan, does that answer the questions you posed?
I think so. I mean, there was one question which I didn't expect you to answer, and that was about the whether the development was already in the minds of people that brought this forward.
Well, on that subject, if you want, the potential for a development such as this at Beckett Well has been in the offing, or has been under consideration for many years. Councillor Shanker will be able to confirm that it was part of their considerations immediately after the fire. But my understanding is that at that point, the position in Beckett Well and the potential developers was nowhere near as advanced as it is. There hadn't been the land acquisition at that point, and it wasn't a viable proposition in that location at that point. So in answer to your question, no, it's not something that's been in the back of people's minds. It came up once the formal decision was, once a decision had been taken that the refurbishment of the assembly rooms was no longer viable. Okay, so moving on then, Councillor Skelton, you indicated next.
Thank you, Chair. Just really wanted to ask a few questions on the fact, obviously, we're paying this fixed price. How are we going to make sure that, shall we say, it doesn't get value engineered, I think is the term. There's obviously things that are important to us, which are obviously a good quality of build, but also things like energy efficiency, which can often, when value engineering takes place, get stripped out. And the same obviously goes for things like sprinklers. Do we yet know those sort of details? Have we had any information? Obviously, we expect certain things.
So I'll give you my view on that, and what my expectations are that by full business case next year, then the detailed spec of the design and build of the venue will be in that business case, and in that, and we will only sign up to that when that spec is agreed. Simon, Ruth, Rachel, is that your understanding?
Absolutely, and just to reaffirm, part of our expectations in the report, we would expect any of that design and build to take into account, good quality and climate change, carbon reduction measures, energy efficiency as part of the standard build.
Okay, anything else, Ruth?
Yes. Obviously, it's good to hear that the Padley Centre is very much involved in their future relocation, and that they're happy with the work that's been done with them thus far. When they say, obviously, they're looking forward to moving to more suitable premises, I'm presuming that means, shall we say, COVID compliant, COVID secure place, whereby people have got either individual rooms, ensuite rooms, so that then should we get a second wave, we're not having to then close down the place like we've had to and move people into hotels and that sort of thing. Could somebody comment on that?
Yeah, they are happy, but also happy and excited at the prospect of more suitable premises, and I would assume Rachel would probably be able to confirm that absolutely that suitability of the accommodation is under full consideration.
Yes, we're taking into account, obviously. I mean, clearly, the hotel did not just house people who were originally residing in the Padley Centre, so that's not quite completely connected, but absolutely. And the opportunity for us to actually move on from the hotel with all of our partners across the city around that homeless pathway, including Padley, get the best possible solution to those really long entrenched rough sleeper issues. This is a chance to really redesign their model. They want to redesign their model to fit into that more effectively. So yes, absolutely, all those things are taken into account.
And then my final question is about the assembly rooms car park, and the fact that the report was saying that not that keen on sort of demolishing that after the main part of the building's been brought down. I would remind everybody about about 25 years ago, we had a hole in the ground opposite the council house on Corporation Street, which is now Sir Peter Hilton Gardens. We don't want the same sort of situation happening again. And I am really concerned that if we actually demolish the car park and therefore demolish several £100,000 worth of our income before we've actually got some secure future for the site, we really are kind of shooting ourselves in the foot. If at all possible, I would think it would be best to demolish in 2 phases. Maybe first of all the auditorium part of the assembly rooms, but leave the car park up until much latter stages where you've actually got to a position where you know who's going to be taking over that.
So on one point, Councillor Repton made an extremely good job of voicing his concerns around the black hole in the city centre, which is something we've considered and won't allow to happen. In terms of knocking the car park down separately to the assembly rooms, as Rachel North said earlier on, the two parts of the building are intrinsically linked, physically linked. It would be extremely difficult and expensive to knock them down in 2 different parts, even if it was possible. So consideration has been given to that. It is a car parking facilities, as I said earlier on, is a consideration, but it's not really at all practical to do it in 2 phases. Did you want to add to that, Rachel?
No, that is the case. Absolutely, Chris.
Thank you.
So can I just come back and say then, are we going to wait till as long as we can before then the demolition goes ahead?
No, the plan is to get planning permission through as soon as possible and get on with the demolition, because the state of the building, it costs us to keep the building there and maintain it and have security on it, etc. It's just getting uglier and uglier and dirtier and dirtier. It needs to come down as soon as practical, to, if nothing else, to give us a vision of what the space looks like and to help us, to guide us to what might best go on there. So no, the plan is to get both down as soon as possible. So if that's it, Rachel, then move on to Ruth, we'll move on to Councillor Shankar.
Thank you, Chris. Unfortunately, the city has been deprived of a large-scale venue since that fire back in 2014, and I'm optimistic and really keen to support this new plan, but really need to reserve my judgment until we can see the detail. And I'm sure it's not just me as a leader of an opposition group, but some of the cabinet and some of your own councillors who have this feeling that we really need to see a bit more detail before we commit to this plan. Only today I've heard 3 different figures on what this is actually costing us, so it's still unclear. And what's further unclear also is, what do we actually get for that circa 45–50 million pounds? So we need to make sure we understand what the cost is and what the scope is. And something we can pick up on the pink papers, I'm sure, there's a significant revenue pressure by doing this. So we just need to make sure we get that right as well, because there are other options where that revenue pressure isn't as much as this proposal. It remains a real source of confusion for me that we don't seem to, although, okay, fair enough, and it's a political decision to say we're not building a new performance venue that was costed and designed on the assembly room site, that's fine. But what we should be doing, really, to be open and transparent, is comparing the 2 options and saying this is the business case for option A, this is the business case for option B. We've heard from the strategic director that there's lots of good benefits from this scheme. The GVA around 11 million, that was comparable with the assembly room site. The new job creation, over 200 new jobs, fantastic, just what's needed. But the new jobs, if you remember from 2017 for the assembly room site was just shy of 400 jobs. So there's going to be pros and cons for both schemes, but we should be able to, at this stage, or pretty soon from this stage, be able to compare both and then decide whether we've got the best option, or it may be we've not got the best option, we've got the second best option, but it's more viable at this stage and it can be delivered. But at least we go into that with our eyes open. And the impact this potentially could create on the market place and around the existing assembly room is massive, and we've heard a lot about that today. Experts have commented on that in the past. It's not just me saying that. Key stakeholders have also demonstrated concerns on that. Just a couple of cabinet meetings ago, when a number of the cabinet members spoke really passionately about the brilliant scheme at the
Baggy, can I ask, do you have any questions, or is this just a position statement from yourself?
No, there's a number of questions as well, Chris. You'd like me to
Can we get to the questions then?
Yeah, sure. But I'm just wanting to recap your memory of what your colleagues were saying about.
You don't need to recap our memory on. We have a very long memory on this, Baggy, and we could.
The heartbeat of the city centre.
We could go through a lot of memories.
Adopt a bit of a bypass operation on that heart of the city with this proposal.
So questions then.
The questions, okay, fine. I can go on to questions if you don't really want to hear what I've got to say.
Well, we know your
first question would be, first
Baggy,
question,
can
I
just say, Baggy, the reason I don't need to hear it anymore is because we've seen and heard your position statements in various forms. I'm still confused because whilst you say you're enthusiastic and want to support this, you also say that you think the best place for an entertainment venue is on the marketplace. So you don't need to repeat your position statement on this.
Well, I think
we're at a cabinet meeting, and the purpose of your contribution today is to ask questions of the officers and the cabinet in relation to the paper.
Yeah, I think it's always helpful, Chris, just to make sure you are listening. Okay, first question is a really simple question, and only today, like I said earlier on today, I've heard 3 different figures. So the first question would be for me is what is the actual capital cost of this proposal, and that's the total. Not we've got this much left from the assembly rooms after you've taken the abortive costs out, and then we need to borrow a bit more here. What's the total cost of this package? And then what I'd also like to know,
we'll know that, Baggy, when the business case is complete, but we can ask for some more detail. I'm sure Simon will fill you more in on the revenue costs as we know them so far under the pink papers bit.
Okay, and then what do we actually get? What do we actually get for that? Do we get just the venue at this stage? Do we get the car
that when we've got a business case fully worked up, Maggie?
Okay, so we still at this stage we don't know what we're getting. Is what you think?
No, we don't.
So when we do get that business case, though, will you give us a commitment, not just to me but to the city, that you'll actually, as any responsible organisation will do, is you'd compare the options to say this business case gives us, or this option gives us this business case, this option gives us an alternative business case, and the decision we're making is to go with X or Y.
Yes,
so
of course we will.
Actually compare.
Of course we will consider all the options, and they'll be brought like this to a cabinet meeting for everybody to discuss.
Brilliant. Okay, cool. Because the report, just so you're mindful of that, the report doesn't suggest that. The report says once this decision is made, all of this will be under delegated authorities, and that, if you look back at the A52 investigations and reports, was something the council was pulled up for, is giving too much delegation away and not bringing back the decision. But if you're given the commitment,
relevant ground at the moment, Baggy, that, but dangerous ground for you to go to as well.
Absolutely not dangerous.
I wouldn't go A52 if I was you.
I'm absolutely confident of going down the A52. If you read
we're
that,
not going to have that debate now because we're talking the entertainment.
As long as you give us the commitment.
Any further questions, Baggy?
Oh, a few, yes. You seem to be a bit touchy, but just relax. So I appreciate your commitment to give us here today that once the business case is done, it comes back to cabinet and, more importantly, comes back for scrutiny. I've got a couple of questions around the forward funding agreement and how that actually works and how that protects the council.
Again, probably best dealt with under financial.
Yeah, somebody could maybe answer that. And the next question, maybe again, it's under the pink papers, but it'd be interesting to know because a lot has bin said and made about this proposal is good for the city because of the way the risk is taken off the council and put onto a developer to design, scope and deliver a project. But in my experience of that, there's always a cost associated with that. So it'd just be good to understand what that cost is, and is it a cost we think is worth paying for the level of risk it mitigates against.
Sure, the officers are making notes of these, and we can answer these under the financial matters.
Brilliant. I've got them written down, so if they do forget, I could bring them up again then, hopefully. I suppose a couple of other questions, and then you can move on, Chris. When we saw the video, which is really good, but I expect it to be really good and glossy at this stage. It's a significant investment from a very reputable developer. There was lots of other buildings on the site, and if you just casually looked at that video, you'd have thought maybe all that development comes along with this, and obviously that doesn't. But do we have any commitments or any other concrete proposals to bring the other developments to that site if this development was to go ahead?
If it wasn't to go ahead.
If this was to go ahead, have we got other people committing to other things? Either way, I suppose, whether this goes ahead or doesn't go ahead. What I'm saying is, on that video that we're showing as a promotion for this site, there's a number of buildings already, shown on that. So, is that just to make that video look good, which is fine? That's fine, because the video it's a marketing video, it needs to look good. I don't knock that, but I'd just like to know if we've got any more commitments for other developments to come to the site.
Not firm commitments, Baggy, but obviously the developer, we anticipate, will bring forward plans such as certainly there'll be need for car parking, and I know they've got aspirations for hotel accommodation in the area as well, but we'll deal with whatever is brought forward by the developer.
Okay, final question, Chris, is obviously we've heard about the Padley Centre, and nobody on the council would want to make a homeless centre homeless. It's good to hear that they're working with the council constructively to find a new purpose-built facility, and hopefully that's resolved without the need for a CPO, because we don't really want to be going down that route with a key organisation in the city who are doing some fantastic work. But my question around there, and again, I maybe wanted to answer it here or in the pink paper side, is I assume with relocating the Padley Centre to suitable premises that there's likely to be a significant cost. Is that cost within this £45 million envelope, or is that likely to be an additional cost on top?
Well, for me, that's for pink papers and negotiation between the developer and Padley themselves. But I just one caveat there. I'm not sure we said purpose-built facility, but a more suitable facility is what we're talking at the moment. So officers will deal with if they know what the financial equation is. We can deal with under financial matters.
Okay.
Is that it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so with that, we've got some indications from Cabinet. Councillor Holmes first, and then Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just to answer a few of the points Councillor Shanker has raised, it's our informed understanding that commercial operators are not interested in the Assembly Room site as a venue due to various aspects, including the footprint and access to the site. So, it's my informed view, actually. If the option was to rebuild on the Assembly Room site, it would mean the venue being managed by the council or significantly subsidised above and beyond the option that we're talking about now. The Assembly Room's build would also mean the project has inherent risks, and those risks would likely fall with the council for the reasons I've just said, and that's something that certainly this administration is no longer prepared to take. And to reinforce that, really, to sum up, it's our understanding that there are multiple commercial operators already expressing an interest in bidding for the long-term management contract, and that should be something we all, the message really is there that there is a significant appetite. That would not be the case, in my understanding, if the option was to demolish and rebuild on the assembly room site. All roads lead to Beckwell, in my view, and I think we should, if we need to nurture some of this, but I think we should have cross-party support. And all through our support behind this project, we need to get on with it and deliver it for the public, because they've been waiting since 2014, and we really do need to draw a line under this and move forward. Of course, there's going to be some detail that the scrutiny commissions and councillors cross-party quite rightly want to see. But I have every confidence that all those questions will be more than answered, and I look forward to the day where Councillor Shanker, Councillor Graves and Councillor Skelton's groups and the independents can fully back what is going to be a fantastic scheme for the city.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo what Matt was saying there, he's picked up on a point that I was going to raise in terms of the location of it. I, for one, was one of those people that Baggy refers to in relation to trying to revitalise that area of the city. I think what's important to remember here is we're not comparing apples with apples. When we're looking at what we looked at back when we were looking at the refurbishment of the assembly rooms there, the comparables that we did, and I'm going back to emails and information that Baggy's had since, but I received back in December of 2018 when we looked at the comparables, because I can assure Baggy, you know, we have looked at this historically. We've looked at what was the comparison with the new build, what would have been a new build and a car park versus assembly rooms, the basics versus enhancement. But what this shows is a development that puts this aside. You know, we can always look backwards on these things and realise that with hindsight is a beautiful thing, and all of these things that we learn further down the line, you know, what the costs were back then when we were looking at this could well be significantly higher. This is the here and now, and actually we've got an opportunity here with somebody that is not part of the council, and if anything is clear, there is a motive for me especially to allow people who have significant knowledge and understanding of these venues, and we've got examples of that across the rest of the country where they've had success in this, in developing this going forward. I think we should take that opportunity, draw a line and accept where we've had we've all had ideas and suggestions in the past, but this is what we've got on the table now. It brings significant improvements to the area, and it's an opportunity that we just have to all get behind and support, because we all know that the city centre is diversifying, it is changing. The whole shopping and everything else is going to be very different to how it once was, and we need to build on that and look at all the opportunities that we have here. So I think it's important to just realise that, you know, is there any point in comparing apples and bananas, or should we stick with just looking at the going forward and the positivity that this brings to the city?
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I had a bit of trouble getting my mic working again there. Paul Simpson, you've indicated you'd like to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm not going to say a huge amount. I think a lot of the detail has been covered from Rachel's really good presentation, and yes, of course, there's some of the finer detail to work through on this. But I guess I just wanted to reiterate, from an officer perspective, our support for this. You know, officers, my senior team, recognise how important this is for the city, and I guess I just wanted to reiterate how positively this was received yesterday when I presented to the Marketing Derby Summit. There was a lot of positivity around this. And I think that from my perspective as the chief executive of the city council, I think this is a really, really positive development for the city that certainly, you know, we all want to get behind. And obviously there's a fair amount of work to make it happen, but I'm confident that we can make it happen. And as I say, I think it's really important for the city that we progress with this. as quickly as we can, and obviously recognising the challenges that Councillor Shankar and others have put into the debate, and obviously we will be more than happy to provide answers to those questions as we go through. Thank you.
So, do we have any other contributions from Cabinet members? Councillor Shankar, you're asking if your questions have been answered. We intend to answer your financial questions and financial pink papers matters. Is there something else you feel hasn't been answered?
And there are a number of questions which I thought we'd be able to answer here, i.e. the total cost.
No, I propose we deal with that under pink papers.
Okay.
Okay. In that case, Cabinet, we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.15. Can they be agreed?
Agreed.
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 Okay, so in the absence of any dissent, then those are agreed. Moving on, then we move to key decisions, and item 8 is the Property Improvement Capital Works Programme. Who's going to present that one for us, please?
Good afternoon, Leader. I believe I will be leading on that one, if that's all right, unless Rachel wants to. So good afternoon, Leader, Cabinet members, other members and colleagues. This paper, item 8, is the Property Department's capital programme for the current year. It's an annual paper. I understand that Derby City Council looks at how we spend our programme of improvement and repairs and maintenance against the already approved capital budget. So this details where we intend to spend that approved budget. The recommendations therefore tie into the previous Cabinet papers, which is why we have a large figure of 31 million. That's not what we're spending directly. That includes the pool, for instance, which is the largest element of that. Within the recommendations is a request, as is customary, to vary projects with the agreement of the Cabinet member and via between projects, subject to a review by the Corporate Property Board. So there is detail within the paper covering some specific projects, but it's probably more informative if I jump to Appendix 2. I apologise if I'm not looking at the screen. I have a second screen where I can look at all the details. And the explanation behind some of these items is covered in the body of the report. So specifically, if I can just pick up a couple of the bigger items which may be picked up by members on the Cabinet. The first one is the Derby Arena, and to be clear, this is not the track of the velodrome, this is the centre sports area where the badminton courts are. The reason why we have a large requirement here is because the floor has been used extensively for entertainment and non-sporting activities since its construction 6 years ago, and it has not been met with the design expectations to do that level of entertainment, because obviously that was for the assembly rooms and other venues at the time, and therefore some of the substructs have failed under the floor, and if we're to continue using it and generating the extra income that it does bring in, then we have a major floor replacement programme. The next item on the list is the Queen's Leisure Centre, and this is the case should we continue with it in a longer term. We have mitigating plans to do less work to keep the facility available, and alternative proposals if we are just keeping it going for a number of years until Moorways comes on stream. So the whole figure there is a substantial sum, which we would clearly not spend all of it if the decision is then taken to close it formally in the next couple of years. We have an item on here around the Padley Centre. Just to be clear, that is not the same Padley Centre that we've just been talking about within the Beckerwell area. We clearly wouldn't be seeking capital payment towards a property we would also be seeking to acquire and subsequently demolish. There is a large section of items grouped together around heating systems, and to be absolutely clear, this isn't just a simple boiler. This will be pipes, this will be building management systems, this will be asbestos removal around old pipes, putting in more efficient controls and pumps and measures, and all new boilers are minimum 93% efficient. These boilers are often sub 80% efficient, and we have extensively looked at alternative methods of heating using green facilities, whether that's wind or even ground source heating, or solar PVs where appropriate, but often they have more complicated arrangements. You need space and so forth. So there is a large package there. And last year, when we did extensive boiler work, that came in under budget. Some of the other items are carried over from previous years, so where we won't have finished a work, such as some windows projects, which is why they're carried over into separate items. But otherwise, the project sets out how we intend to spend the approved budget on our portfolio. That's the paper, Leader.
Thank you very much. Executive Scrutiny looked at this last night and resolved to note the report. Do we have any questions or comments from group leaders to start with?
Nothing from me, Chair.
Nothing from me.
In that case, then, I'll take that as a no. And any comments or questions from Cabinet, please? No. In that case, we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.5. Can they be agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Excellent. Excellent. So we can then move on to item 9 on the budget and policy framework matters. Financial accounts 1920 outturn report for general fund, etc. I presume this is Simon.
Thank you, Chair. So this report is the sort of narrative report alongside the final accounts that have been completed and will soon be published on our website. And this builds on the quarterly monitoring that the Cabinet bring in an open and transparent fashion every quarter in respect of the financial position on the general fund, which is the Council's day-to-day operating budget, the capital budget, which is about delivering the capital ambitions and its financing, the housing revenue accounts, dedicated schools grant and Treasury Management. The headlines in this are that the Council did forecast an overspend on its revenue budget throughout 2019-20, primarily due to the increase in children's social care costs, and members will recall the narrative around the back of the previous financial year, first quarter of this year, about unaccompanied asylum seeker children at Laverstock Court, which created a pressure, and also every council across the country is experiencing increases in their looked after children. And I suppose one of my reflections on that figure is that we managed to contain that through a series of interventions and actions at what we reported in quarter one, despite an increase in the looked after children that the council became responsible for during the financial year, and on some of the other budgets making savings to mitigate and compensate for some of that pressure. That overspend has had to be funded from reserves, and that was stated again in quarter one, that would be the funding source if it could not be reduced in full in the financial year. The capital budget shows a delivery of 82.55% of the approved £107 million capital programme, and it shows an underspend of which the majority of the underspend is slipping into the current financial year or future financial years, matched by the financing attached to it. And the report details various schemes and their explanations, and I hope members can view that as being a comprehensive explanation of why the capital schemes may have been slipped or may have underspent, because it is a mixture of both. Treasury Management is again just showing the transactions in the year, and that's detailed in the report. And there was a small amount of borrowing at the end of financial year, especially relating to the sort of cash flow needs at the end of the financial year, in line with good financial practice. But our borrowing is still, we are still significantly under borrowed for the capital expenditure that we have incurred in the past, so we're in a good position there. The housing revenue account showed an improved position of about 4 million, which again sets us up well for the future. And something that is often ignored, but very important, the dedicated schools grant, where the council still has a responsibility. Many councils across the country are experiencing excessive pressures on their dedicated schools grant, and we manage through good management and working with the school community to ensure that we only close that with a deficit of £250,000 on the central non-delegated items. So overall, this report gives a very comprehensive overview of the financial year. It's consistent with what has been reported in the financial year, and I'm happy to take any technical questions on this report.
Thank you very much for that. Can I just have to say at the outset, obviously very challenging times, but a very detailed report and a timely report. Thank you very much to you and your staff, Mr. Riley. If you convey our thanks, that would be appreciated. So we had executive scrutiny look at this last night, and they've come with two recommendations. Councillor Repton, do you want to submit those to the Cabinet? Are you there, Martin? Martin, are you there?
Sorry, I had problems with my mic. Can the officer put the recommendation on the screen? Is that possible? Karen or Lindsay?
I can read them out for you, Martin, if you want them.
Well, yeah, no, I'm okay. In terms of the recommendations, were that Cabinet must learn from this matter. This is with regard to the assembly rooms, but there we are. Yep. To recommend to Council Cabinet that it should learn from the poor management of the assembly room saga, and remember the importance of listening to and acting upon expert professional advice. And to recommend to Council Cabinet that in relation to the refurbishment of the assembly rooms, it apologises for the dither, delay and indecision that has led to many wasted years, no performance venue in the city centre, in the centre of our city, and a staggering abortive cost of £2.468 million. I think the executive scrutiny felt it was important for Cabinet to show some humility over this, apologise, draw a line under it, and learn from those mistakes and then move on. I hope Cabinet will agree.
Thank you for the recommendations, Martin. Deal with them one at a time. From my point of view, if you like, when we came to administration, we had to learn very, very quickly about the mistakes of the past, because there were many that we found from day one that we found and we had to deal with. And in terms of dealing with and listening to officers' advice, we do that every day in every format, through scrutiny, through the variety of close scrutiny that we as Cabinet give to officers. We listen to advice, but we take that for what it is. It's advice, and we take full account of that. So we don't need to apologise in relation to any decisions in relation to that. In terms of apologising for the delay and indecision that has taken place over the wasted years, well, we're talking 6 years, and we've been administration for 2, so 2/3 of those years were under a previous administration. If scrutiny felt that we wanted to apologise on behalf of all previous administrations where things could have been done better, for example, the way that the insurance money was spent under the previous administration, then we might be able to agree to that. But in the circumstances, these two recommendations are not acceptable. We're in the business of taking the city forward, dealing with potential future benefits for the city, not looking at over our shoulder and getting into political blame games. So from my point of view, these two recommendations are not acceptable.
That's a shame.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else indicated they wish to speak?
Sure. Can I speak on this, please?
Yes, you were first to indicate. Alan, yes, by all means.
I just wanted to say on the recommendations of the scrutiny board, I find that this is pure politicking and in my view very unhelpful. I mean, you sort of mentioned not listening to so-called professional advice was also the problem with the last Labour Council. In fact, Martin was part of that. I think it's a pointless finger-waving exercise that makes no progress, and it just causes futile bickering.
Thank you, Alan, for that contribution. That does actually prompt me to remember that there was some concern for me about the predetermined nature of these recommendations last night. These were meant to be recommendations of the scrutiny committee rather than recommendations of Councillor Repton brought, already printed, already typed up and provided to officers and then delivered in the format that we've seen them today. So I have concerns around the politicking nature of these recommendations myself. Who else has asked to speak? Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. Just to echo that, thank you, Councillor Graves. Excuse me. I apologise for that in the background. I have children at home with me at the moment, so I apologise. Yes, just to reiterate what Alan was saying there, thank you, Councillor Graves. It is a shame that, bearing in mind this is a report around the whole of the accounts of the City Council, and that we have an extremely difficult year. We're not hiding behind the fact that this, for every council across the entire country at the moment, there's difficult times with adult services, with children's services, and it's a shame that this has been brought in purely to make recommendations around a project that we've already discussing on many levels. And as I've said in the previous comments, we're trying to compare apples with bananas here. We're living in the past. We need to move on, accept the future, and live with what we're dealing with at the moment. And we accept that it's going to be a challenge. There are going to be further challenges to be had in relation to the accounts going forward. We have had to make use of the reserves, which we don't hide behind. We don't shy behind. At the end of the day, this is a really difficult time for all councils across the city and across the country. And just to echo that point, really, it's such a shame that we are bringing it back to these sad politically motivated comments when we should be grateful for the fact that our accounts teams, our function here at the City Council, has done an excellent job in pulling these figures together in that climate to get us to understand where we're at. Because if I remember correctly, we've had an issue in the past where accounts weren't presented for up to 18 months and 2 years, was it previously, Baggy, where accounts weren't ready. So I think it's something that we should be proud of, that actually the council has been able to create this outturn.
468 down the drain.
Sorry, I believe this is our meeting, is it, Councillor Poulter? Can I continue?
Yes, please, no interruptions. Councillor Repton, you weren't interrupted yourself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So actually, from a point of view of what we have achieved within this council and that the administration have done, we are dealing with very difficult circumstances. With that, every day is a changing day. Things are changing with every issue that we have, whether that's children's services, whether that's COVID, and actually we have to live in the here and now and move forward and take the positives where we can. So thank you, Mr. Riley and your team, for all the work and effort that has gone into creating the outturn report in such a timely and well presented manner and bringing to us it to this point at least. So just to thank you for that.
Thank you. Councillor Shank has indicated next.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, a couple of points. I mean, I don't need to defend Councillor Repton. I'm sure he'll defend defend himself, but just to remind everybody, previous chairs of exec scrutiny have asked members specifically to prepare recommendations before they come to the meeting to discuss them. So if somebody's done some work, whatever the recommendation is, and I'm not going to go into the notes of that, it's been actually asked for. I'll keep the rest of my points to the actual report. And thanks, Simon and team, for the excellent work. I absolutely agree. It's not easy, and it's really, really difficult to prepare the accounts and get them to the shape they have, that you have them in a timely manner to present them as per statutory obligations for the council. But you're probably not going to be surprised, Simon, in the point I'm going to make, and I've made it last year, and I made it the year before, and I've made it throughout the year at outturn reports as well. We the last 2 years definitely have fallen into a trap of at budget setting, which I absolutely agree is only a plan of the finances for the forthcoming year. We look at the pressures and we look at the outturn for the previous year, and we say, right, we're going to put some of that into the new year. Rather than all of it, we say we're going to put some of it because we're going to manage something differently. And predominantly it's around children's services, which is a very, very challenging area. But instead of managing or putting in the 13-14 million pound extra we need, we only tend to put about half of that in. And we say, we're going to manage the demand, and we're going to put, it's only going to be 6 or 7 million this year. And then we balance the budget by saying, there's some difficult decisions we're not going to make, the necessary savings or additional savings to what we've already proposed. So we're going to borrow about 6 or 7 million pound out of reserves right at the beginning of the year. So in my view, that isn't a balanced budget setting. I made that point on a number of occasions, Simon. You'll know that, so it's not something new to you. At the beginning of the year, we use reserves to actually balance our budget. So technically, I would argue that's not a balanced position, but in difficult financial circumstances, I accept that's what reserves should be used for. And then we go throughout the year saying, we're okay. We're 6-7 million pound overspent again at the end of the year. So what we're doing, we'll dip into the reserves again to balance ourselves at the end of the year. So my point there is we weren't balanced at the beginning of the year, we weren't balanced at the end of the year, and we're taking a lot of money out of reserves. And then, not just in the accounts, but in the glossy sort of annual report stuff, which is further down the agenda today, we have statements similar to what we've done over the past year. We delivered a balanced budget and achieved 100% of in-year savings. No, you could gloss around the words and argue that, and we could argue against that's not quite true. But mathematically, it's not the case, is it? We're not setting balanced budgets, and we need to get better at that, because the council needs to get better at that to make sure we're doing justice to the people we're here to represent. Previous supporter of yours, or it's widely reported, shall I say? It's available out there, and the challenges around why we don't seem to do this, and we just need to get better at it. We just need to be really open and transparent, genuinely open and transparent, rather than just the catchphrase, and make sure when we set the budget, and when there's a minority administration, there's got to be compromises, as we've seen this year. But when we do set the budget, because it's not fair on officers in certain areas will probably feel demotivated because they see us continually overspending, and they're not, because they're telling us at the beginning of the year they struggle to deliver the service that they're obliged to deliver with the budgets they've got. So any of your comments or thoughts on that side around how we do get better at that? A couple of other points I just want to make.
Can we just deal with that one first, Baggy?
If
Mr. Riley can take that as a question rather than a statement, then he might wish to respond to that before you go on.
Thank you. And Councillor Shankar raised a series of questions, but he also gave the answer in his first comment that this is a financial forecast about the demand and activity that as a council we think could happen. And a budget in itself says, what do we think the demand is? And what do we think the solutions are for meeting that demand? And maybe just to bring out two aspects, I in this report, I mentioned in my presentation about the unknown cohort of children who came out of unaccompanied asylum seeker children at Laverstock Court that impacted in the back end of 18-19 and quarter 1 of this financial year, and we reported that and we have provided for that in the accounts. The other aspect is that the colleagues in People Services and right across the council have been looking at how we find innovative solutions for meeting that demand, whether that be sort of a rebalancing foster care, which again we've explained in our committee reports, asset-backed and service-backed interventions for children and families. And all of these, if I've got to be honest, throughout the year have helped to manage the increase in the looked after children population with the most cost-effective solution. But as Andy Smith, as the Director of Children's Services, would say, every council is having to try and meet the needs with the provision which is out there. And this city, many years ago, in a sense, through a number of reasons, lost, for example, foster carers in the city and had to provide independent foster carers. And we're having to constantly look at how we can balance demand and cost. And last year, I think, demonstrated that the council and its operational managers actually managed to keep a lid on it. And I suppose that's a message that I want to say, that it was reported at quarter 1 and was managed through the financial years. I will, as always, try and give you the professional advice when setting a budget of the forecast, risk, opportunity, cost and balance, and I will continue to do that.
Thank you, Mr. Riley. Councillor Rolson, I want to come in briefly on this point, and then I'll bring you back for your next question, Becky.
Yes, just to, I think Simon picked up on my main points actually. I think what I was trying to get across is the fact that a budget is that, and it is a budget. It's what we estimate. Now, my crystal ball could not have predicted COVID, nor could it have predicted the influx of asylum-seeking adults that were children and that will be with us for a number of years. So we have to be quite able to accept change within that, and I think Baggy, of all people, having delivered accounts himself using reserves on every occasion, I believe, will be able to explain that in a bit more detail one day, I'm sure.
Thank you. Councillor Shanky, your next question.
Sure. I can explain that now. On many occasions, if let us do a little bit more research, we actually put money into the reserves and built the reserves over a number of years. But anyway, that's for a different day. In the report on one of my favourite topics, the Simpson waste plant, it talks about rectification costs of just over £2.14 million, I think. I just wanted some clarification around that. It actually refers to rectification and assessment costs. I'm assuming these are all assessment costs and no rectification works have been done at this stage. So that's a point being made there. The exec scrutiny have made recommendations on the abortive costs of £1.287 million for the assembly rooms. I know that's been spoken about on a number of occasions today. But again, it's on various things, Simon. I read different figures for that abortive costs of the assembly rooms to look at the refurbishment option. Are you confident the total figure for abortive cost is 1.287 million, or is that figure indeed any different? And the last thing, just briefly, I would mention, just to get a bit more clarification on, is £100,000 being spent on artwork on the A52 bridge. What exactly are we getting for that £100,000?
So, Simon, there was a number of questions in there. Incinerator, assembly rooms costs, and A52 bridge. I know you answered those. I know you answered them all last night. So, but if you want to just comment on them.
So, thank you, Chair. And I did answer these last night, and the YouTube transcript is there. In terms of use of rectification costs, I think I said last night that I'd use that as survey costs incurred in post-August in terms of establishing the situation at the plant, and I mentioned that I'd change it from a work rectification, and I think you've implied that in your question anyway, Councillor Shanker. In terms of the assembly rooms, we state in this report effectively the total cost incurred to date, and they roughly fell in 50% abortive costs that would not be beneficial for any future capital use of the site, and 50% of work that surveys and other work that we would have incurred in order to eventually sort of demolish the site or anything else. And that judgment is in line with my own professional accounting judgment of how those should be split. You may have had some figures with 20 or 30,000 difference, because we do, if you want to call it, produce the accounts by the end of May with estimates of the best calculations that we have at that point in time. But the figures in the report are consistent with the final accounts, and I think the explanation explains that. And in terms of 100,000 for the artwork on the bridge, which is the new iconic bridge, that was a delegated decision in the year from available budgets that the council has, and it's actually to celebrate the fact that that bridge is providing connectivity to Pride Park, to Derby County, and everything else, and actually allows the community to, in a sense, if you want to call it, make that connection between connecting the city and the sort of the essence of the city, which is Derby County, and everything else. But that was a delegated decision within existing budgets. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Simon. Any other contributions from Cabinet members?
Me, Chair, if that's possible, just to add to Simon's contribution there, it is far more than just the Rams Legends. It is actually a celebration of the history and heritage of the city. Whilst it's obviously recognised that it is a link on match days, it's obviously a route, a vastly improved route for that side of Derby to Pride Park. And because of the size of the structure and the walkways, we will use that space for public realm that will identify its place as the gateway to Derby. I'm very excited about it. I hope all councillors will be as well. I know that public realm can be very controversial sometimes, but I believe that the public, when they see what's being celebrated and they're part of choosing that, certainly the footballing player management element of it, we're very excited about that, and it will actually add a lot of value to not just the Gateway Bridge, but in its own right as well. It'll be something that many people from that side of the city that use that to commute, to shop and to go to work will enjoy for years to come. And I think actually this first investment in that public realm can be built on in future years, but that's for another time, and I hope that the public will get behind it and celebrate it, and we can have a conversation of how we enhance it in the future.
Okay, thank you. Agreed. I know that Councillor Skelton's currently lost connection. If she does get back in, we can return to any of these issues that she might have questions for, and I know officers are working to get her back connected. So if there's no other contributions, then we have recommendations 2.1 to 2.3. Can they be agreed, please, Cabinet?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. Take those as accepted. We'll move on then to contract and financial procedure matters. Item 10, compliance with contract and financial procedure rules. Mr. Riley again, I anticipate.
Okay, so thank you, Chair. This is one of our standard reports, acceptance of funding from Department of Transport. Members will recall about 3 years ago we got 262 million access fund grant to encourage transport planning and other offers which are detailed in the reports. It's really quite pleasing that they want to extend this for another year. and it's 262,000 of grant. And so this report is just formalising that and some of the areas where it has benefited us previously: personal travel planning, cycle training, bike maintenance, business and community engagement, events and promotions. And when we have a look at this alongside, say, the Transforming Cities funding of over 60 million and some of the other exciting announcements that have happened recently, like e-bikes and everything else, then this is really promoting that sustainable sort of transport type solutions for the city. So it's a standard report, but quite gratifying to have another year of funding.
Thank you. Do we have any questions, contributions on these financial matters? No. In that case, we have recommendation 2.1. Can we accept that, Cabinet?
Agreed.
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 Thank you. In that case, so there were no recommendations. The item was noted, I understand, by executive scrutiny. So at this point, I'd like to introduce the other late item in relation to the Museums Trust, as it falls under financial matters effectively. Is it Rachel might be presenting this one, or is it Claire?
It's Claire, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Over to you, Claire.
Thank you very much, Chair. Right, as many of you are aware, the Museum of Making at Derby Siltmill is a really important and exciting project. It showcases and celebrates Derby's 300 years of history of making. In March 2020, the COVID-19 lockdown came in, and the project was, up until that point, within budget and programme. As a result of the impacts of the pandemic, the project opening for the new museum has now needed to be moved from September 2020 through to spring 2021. This has understandably resulted in there being an increase to the financial amount for capital needed by the Museums Trust to complete the project. COVID-19 is not covered by the construction contract, as it is considered a force majeure event. Therefore, the Museums Trust has approached external funders, including the Council, and their requests are that they would appreciate the Council considering two things. One, a loan for $914,000 to assist with their cash flow, and a capital contribution of $364,000 to support increased capital costs. It's proposed that the loan is offered, and that is at an interest rate of 3.02%, which adds in some commerciality. We'd like this to be considered to be paid back within 12 months, and this will be paid back from the retention of the project funds. So there are two external funders, they have retention on their funding, adding up to over £1 million. So this is anticipated to be paid back from that retention when it's released. The temporary loan, therefore, will be applied from the capital, it will be taken from unapplied capital receipts from the Council. The capital contribution is to a maximum value of $364,000, and this is to be funded from the existing capital contingency reserve, therefore has no impact on other existing schemes. By demonstrating the Council's commitment to the Siltmill Museum of Making project, it will help secure additional external funding to support completing the construction of the project. Other external funding is likely to be contingent on the Council showing its commitment to the project, and by committing the funding that's requested in the Cabinet report, this is hopefully going to be helpful in achieving this. It is very important to complete the project, to utilise a unique and valuable council asset in the city, as well as to contribute towards a future vision for culture, which is an important and instrumental building block for the recovery of our city. And it's also going to contribute towards future economic growth. So leave it there, Chair. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Exec scrutiny looked at this, and as Councillor Repton points out, they were very supportive towards this request, but came with no particular recommendations. Comments, questions from anybody, please?
Yes, please, Chair.
Yep. By all means.
One obvious, project manager question. So if we take the delay, which say has been 3 or 4 months since we first went into lockdown, yet it's transpiring into the delay of the opening for 6, probably 7 months. That's probably an obvious question, Claire. How do we explain that?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Shanker. What's happened is that there's been a delay to the construction itself of about 8 weeks, which was anticipated to be 10 originally. So it was good that we got back on site on the 11th of May, so earlier than expected. However, once back on site, we've got to then deal with the COVID-19 measures that we need to put in place to keep contractors safe. So that then means that we can't have work running simultaneously as much as we otherwise would have done. We have to spread it out over a longer period of time because we can't have as many people in one place given the distancing that government guidelines would expect. So they're the main reasons really why it spans out. There's a couple of then delivery issues. So one item, for example, had to come from abroad, so there's slightly more delay in certain items coming over into the country to be part of the project. So all in all, it's a forecasted opening of spring 2021.
Thanks, Claire.
Okay. Any other contributions, questions? Councillor Shanker, you actually preempted my question there in relation to the delay being more than the break caused by COVID, and I just needed to pick up on what was Claire's opening comments really, in that prior to COVID, the scheme was COVID, the scheme was on budget and on programme. Is that factually correct? Is that there were no budget pressures, there were no time pressures, and everything was honky-dory?
So I was in a board meeting for the project in March, and we were absolutely fine. Within a week or two of that, the pandemic lockdown was announced by the government, and the project therefore had to stop completely. And that was literally a few days after the project board, where we predicted that things were on track.
Okay, so a general observation for me, Claire, if you like, that this project is absolutely vital to the recovery plan for the city centre. It has massive potential in terms of visitor numbers for the city, for the vitality of that particular area, etc. Absolutely acknowledge that we have to make this commitment to finishing off this project, which, if anybody's seen any of it so far, can only be described as impressive. But like any scheme, there's a need to bear in mind budgets and where possible keep to budget and to limitations in relation to the amount of funding that the council can afford to give. Recommendation 2.3 recommends a contribution final value of 364,000, which is not an insignificant sum in relation to this, and add that to considerable support the Museums Trust has had in the past. We just, as a cabinet, I think feel we need to just re-emphasise the need for the Museums Trust to manage their budgets and keep to the promises that they've made in the past. So with that caveat, and probably the need just to not audit but just check the extent of the funding required from the council. The loan can be the loan, but the contribution from the council needs to be a maximum amount for me, and subject to scrutiny, if you like, in the circumstances, but with the complete intention that the scheme is finished off to the best possible level to make the best contribution that it can take. So with that little caveat, are we able to accept the recommendations 2.1 to 2.3?
Agreed.
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 Okay. I think I mentioned exec scrutiny considered this and made no recommendations. So that completes that item. Moving on then, takes us to, let's get my other computer back up to speed, takes us to item 11, the Council Delivery Plan, monitoring Q4. Is that Heather?
It is. Thank you, Chair. So this paper reports the final quarter's review of performance for 1920, which covers the period from January to March. A summary is shown at paragraph 4.1 in terms of actions contained within the Council Delivery Plan, performance measures, risks and projects. Overall, it is positive to note that 71% of the delivery plan actions are judged to be completed or on track. As the Section 151 officer presented to the June Cabinet, we have seen a significant impact of COVID-19 from both a service delivery and a financial perspective. And we have tried to reflect any immediate impacts in the detail contained in Appendix 1. In particular, there are an additional 3 risks in respect of COVID, which have been added to the Strategic Risk Register, and these continue to be managed through the ongoing Council response to COVID. The report contains a summary of highlights and priorities for improvement, shown by the 3 themes contained within the Council plan. So a city of big ambition, a city of health and happiness, and a council focused on the things that matter. I would perhaps draw Cabinet's attention to particular achievements this quarter, which include progress against some of the large capital projects, for example, Our City, Our River, the A52, and also rollout of local area coordination, which I think we have seen as being pivotal in supporting our community hub approach over the last few months as we have been addressing some of the COVID challenges. We've also worked closely with Derby Homes to provide affordable new homes and also support homeless and rough sleepers. We do, however, recognise there are areas for improvement, not least the ongoing challenges that we've seen within children's services, which have been referred to in the financial outturn report. I think overall, Chair, that was all I was going to say, but I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Heather. And just again, an overall observation, these have been difficult times, and I think the achievements and the levels of response here from across the council have been remarkable. They could have had a much more serious effect on our targets here and things. So again, thank you to the staff in relation to that. Exec Scrutiny looked at this last night and resolved to note the report. Do we have any questions or contributions from opposition leaders first? No.
Nothing from me, Chair.
Have we got Councillor Skelton back in yet? Do we know?
Yes, I was only away for about 7 minutes, I think. So.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, if there's anything in that time you're away that you wanted to raise, let us know. We can go back to it. But hopefully you'll be able to stay in from now on. We're going to just say we have got our Mayor and Vice Mayor in, Connie and Priya in. Please feel free at any point to, if you've got a question on any of these things, by all means, if you can enter it into the chat, then do so. But otherwise, just speak up, and we're more than happy to hear from you. And we do appreciate your attendance for what's been quite a long meeting so far. So thank you for that. So in relation to this item, we have recommendation 2.1. Can we agree that Cabinet, please?
Agreed.
Okay, so the next item is in relation to the council plan. I think, is that you, Heather, again?
It is indeed. Thank you, Chair. Overall, I'm very pleased to present the Council's annual report for 1920. This is a really important document in terms of communicating progress that we've made against our Council Plan priorities. It also demonstrates how we have used the Council's resources and recognises the achievements of the Council's hard-working staff, often working in collaboration with councillors, partners and communities to deliver improvements that have made a positive difference to our city. Subject to Cabinet approval, we will look to publish the annual report and very much publicise these achievements. The annual report is split into two parts. There is a user-friendly version which can be found in Appendix 1 and there is more detail shown in Appendix 2. Again, I'm happy to take any questions on this.
Thank you, Heather. We're actually very pleased to receive it, and particularly the detail of it and the quality of it is fantastic in the circumstances. It's obvious that there's an awful lot of time gone into it. We hope that it's well received, hope that it's useful to people, because we want people to see what we've been able to achieve and what we intend to achieve going forward. So again, thank you to you and your team for the production of that. Exec Scrutiny did look at this item last night and resolved to note the report. Thank you. Any comments, any questions from opposition group leaders?
None from me.
Okay, thank you. Cabinet members, any contributions, questions? In that case, we have recommendation 2.1 to agree, if that's okay, Cabinet.
Agreed. Agreed.
Thank you very much. So that completes the public session in relation to this. I have a statement to read out a recommendation to exclude the press and the public, and that goes as follows: to consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item, and that is that under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following item on the grounds that it involves the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 and 5 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Can we agree that proposal?
Agreed. Agreed. Agreed.
Agreed, then so be it. When we've got confirmation that the